Well, that is 1 in every 5 combat soldiers, potentially thousands suffering from PTSD. Since retiring as a captain after the first Gulf War, Chambrier has been a tireless advocate for veterans and their families. And we're also joined on this Sunday in Winnipeg by Steve Stowes, who is about to be released from the forces after combat duty in Afghanistan. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ken.
Sean, I want to start with you. The military says the 15 job notice cuts that went out this week are for people who are studying PTSD, that they can get all the information that they need from other sources, international sources. Is that true?
Well, no, because I mean, for the longest defense for the Canadian Forces is that they have a particular context, that we have lower PTSD numbers than every other nation. So in essence, for the past 10 years, they've been telling us that, Canada has to do its own research. And yet, when the cuts come, they then backtrack on cutting these epidemiologists, and we will not have the specific Canadian picture. I mean, the truth is that there's more than just the epidemiologists being affected. We're talking about the entire research organization, DARPA, which has a 15% budget cut. They do a lot of research into mental health issues and have a lot of practitioners and clinicians that are doing good research in the Canadian context.
Now, General Natinchuk says even given that, we still have the best health care for our soldiers for PTSD.
I mean, I have a lot of respect for General Natinchuk. He's a good, compassionate man. However, who's labeling it the best health care for soldiers? I mean, problem is in the military is that we don't have a feedback mechanism to really evaluate, are the soldiers in need getting their needs met? And I would hazard to probably question General Natinchuk in this aspect.
All right, well, let's go to Steve with that very question then. Steve, thanks for joining us to talk about this. You were injured physically in Afghanistan. You're suffering some of the emotional impact. Are you getting the care that you think you need?
Well, I can tell you this, most of my psychological injuries are coming from not getting the proper physical care. Since I've been home, I've been fighting nonstop for my own care kind of deal. And that's just brought such a psychological toll on me that it's been devastating to my whole life and my whole mental state. I have a battle with the medical system, and then as well one with Veterans Affairs.
So what happened, Steve? Is it that they don't believe you, or is it that there's so much red tape around it?
Well, I know I'm a very complex case because I have been blown up 3 times and I have multiple injuries, but it's just it seems like I was the back of the bus kind of deal. And the problem doesn't lie within the staff that at the 11 Health Services in Shiloh. It more or less lies in the lack of staff. Like at one point we had no physiotherapists on base, no case management. I had to take my own case and manage it. Try and do that with head injuries. It was such a mess to try and keep your life straight and then take these battles on and then try and meet all your appointments, try and get appointments for that matter. So. And
have you been diagnosed with PTSD yourself?
I don't have PTSD. I've got 14 out of the 15 symptoms of it. Like, I don't have flashbacks from Afghanistan or the dreams I have. I don't particularly mind. It's most of my psychological stuff comes from the fight after. I suffer depression, anxiety, paranoia, that kind of stuff. So almost everything's there for PTSD, just that one portion.
And so therefore you're not qualified for any sort of help for PTSD. Now let me ask you, has anybody from the military, because you've been speaking out about this week, has anybody called you up and say, hey, you got to stop talking about this stuff?
Actually, I was ordered not to do this interview, but at the end of the day, I have to live with myself, and I couldn't live with myself not getting this info out there and making a difference. So it's too late for me. I've already gone through all this junk, and stuff is just starting to roll now. But if I can prevent it from happening for one more guy, then I'm happy. Then that means the world to me.
So when they told you not to do the interview, did they talk about any consequences of doing the interview?
Well, yeah, it's disobeying a direct order by being here. But this cause is more worthy than the cause in Afghanistan, and I was willing to die for the cause in Afghanistan to me. So
wow.
That just goes to show how much this means to me.
Yeah, and that you're not alone, and Sean, he isn't alone. I mean, is that typical of how difficult it is to get action within the military on this stuff?
It's quite typical, and actually this brings us back to the research aspect, because PTSD is just one of the reactions that can devastate someone from an exposure to stressors. The other two, which Steve is directly talking about, are called moral injury and grief. I mean, loss of something that he cherishes, which is his military career. And when there's a lack of social support, then the PTSD symptoms, the number one predictor that they will become worsened and become chronic, is the lack of social support. And that's exactly what Steve's talking about. And this is widespread across the entire population of veterans that are trying to, and soldiers that are trying to access benefits. When they encounter red tape, when they encounter a lack of resources, they encounter delays, that this makes the situation worse. So it's highly counterproductive for DND. It's highly counterproductive for society to be treating these soldiers this way.
Now, we'll be hearing from a member of the government on this issue in a moment, but is the problem the political will, or after all the years that you've looked at this, is the problem that people inside the chain of command still don't get it?
Well, I think, when we look at DND, we look at the fact that the headquarters staff has increased by 40% over the past basically 6 or 7 years, and yet the frontline soldiers, the pointy end, the regular force guys have increased less than 10%. So what we're talking about is a bureaucracy that's gone out of control. It's the same thing of Veterans Affairs. They're out of touch of what frontline needs are. They're out of touch of what it means to serve in the military, in a combat zone. So they're making these cutbacks without understanding what's needed. Now, General Leslie, who wrote that quite damning report about how the military needs to be restructured, clearly pointed out that it's not the frontline staff that should be cut, such as epidemiologists that are doing research or service providers. He talked about the headquarters that have grown by 40%.
So, Sean, let me ask you then, I mean, as a country, we hadn't really had much combat experience, I guess, since the Korean War. You're the first generation, Steve, that's coming out with this kind of experience. And, is it fair to say that maybe headquarters was a little surprised, that they're a little overwhelmed, or how does it feel to you on the inside?
Well, for me, I just feel, it's a little bit of surprise. It's a little bit of just overwhelming kind of deal. Like, I know Shiloh is overwhelmed. The doctors there are great and they work hard, but they're overwhelmed kind of deal, and we kind of suffer for it. And Shiloh's a kind of a secluded base, right? So it's hard to get staff to go out there. I could see that for sure. So
what are you going to do now, Steve? I mean, you're facing discharge. You've probably got a couple of angry people at you right now. What are you going to do?
I'm just going to try and live. I want to end this fight that I've got going on with them, just make it stop, because this has become way too overwhelming for me. And as an individual, trying to scream up and say this is wrong, like, I'm not really heard. But as a group of individuals, we might be heard, or in this sense, getting the message directly to the hires and saying there are problems, and I'm willing to work with anyone. I have all the documentation of everything I went through. I'm willing to work with anyone to try and make these changes happen.
All right, Steve, continue to heal, and thanks for taking that risk on behalf of your fellow soldiers. We appreciate it. And Sean, thank you for being with us today.
Yes, and thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for appearing today.
No, thank you.